Hello, this is an overview of DeskTop PostFlop, a open source solver tool which I have found very useful. I'm going to go over some of the functionality of DeskTop PostFlop, and I'm going to do that by going through a hand I recently solved. This really isn't a pure how-to of DeskTop PostFlop, but if you're considering using this tool, this will give you an introduction. So let's start with the hand that we're going to go over to give some context. So this is a hand I played where we flop the nut flush. Flop the set. So we open, we get 3-bet, call. We've got the dream flop here for a particular holding. We check. I choose to fast play. I raise in position to a little bit less than 3x. He calls. You get this turn, good turn for our hand. We bet, and this is when this hand went a little wuggy, but I think it's good for demonstration purposes because we can see the old hand, and he wouldn't have called anyway. So I bet about the third. He calls. Now on river, I timed out, so I didn't bet. This obviously is an all-in every day. But in this particular case, because I had no time bank, I checked, and we see what Bone had. He would have folded. But yeah, this is a pure shove. Anyway, let's go through this hand. Let's start with an overview of how we set up a solve. This is actually showing a run-through of the entire hand to river. So when you run through an entire hand, with these sizing, etc., this is what the end result of our river decision would be. So this is what the solver looks like to configure and set up. We'll start with ranges. You can set up ranges by, as you can see, I've set a number of ranges. You set up ranges here. You can obviously change these if you want. Click any place, give it a weight, and you can add or delete. I've saved, as you can see, a number of ranges for use. Obviously, this is a cache hand, as you can see. We can then back these up by using export JSON, which I've done here. I've got a number of backups. So this is the imposition range in this particular hand. I'm not going to focus really on strategy here. This is more about an overview of DeskTop PostFlop. Out of position range. And this is where you put the board, the flop texture, the flop board. And then this is, I think, the more complex part of setting up a solve, which is here. So, since this is a cache hand, a common convention when building a cache building a cache solve rather, is that we add a digit so we can be a little bit more granular in our betting. We can add right here, and these are our sizes. Our hero, the developer, nicely put some prompts in where required. For instance, here, so we can look and see some details about how we enter our bet sizings. And I'm going to show a particular feature I really like. So here on this screen, we can configure our bet size, configure our raises, etc., etc. And then we can preview and edit tree here. We can go through the hands. So in this particular hand, essentially this is a tool to confirm we've got all the sizings that we want in a particular solve. And if we want to take sizings out, we can. So in this particular hand, for instance, I would want to make sure that my proper sizing of my in-position raise of 19.7 big blinds is included. So as we saw, fill in got 7.4 big blinds, and my raise of 197 is not in here, but if I want to add it, I can. So let's add that right now. So we can add a bit action. So we know we want 197, so we go here, 197, which was my raise. We can add that, and now it appears. So now we have modified how the solve will run using the tree preview to get an exact representation of what happened in the hand. And this goes on. He calls, checks. So he calls, checks, and then we can confirm again. So this time we do have our sizing of 204. That's great. We could go all the way through the tree, save edit, and now we see it down here as added. So this is just a quick representation of the tree configuration for DeskTop PostFlop. Once we've actually configured our tree and configured our ranges, added a board, we could then go to Run Solver here, and we can hit Build New Tree. Now, this is one feature I really like about DeskTop PostFlop, is that it runs in a relatively small memory space. So you don't need a lot of memory to run a complex solve. And it also is very efficient with compute as well. With this particular solve, you can see we can run this with 5 gigs. These days, this obviously fits into most people's desktops, if not laptops. I'm actually running this on a laptop. So we would build the tree here, and then this would light up, and we would hit Run Solver. And we would then have it run down to our chosen target exploitability, and we get a very interesting read at how long it took. This one took about 20 minutes. So that's how we actually set up a build, set up a solve. He also has added a feature which I have not delved into, which is the bunching effect, which essentially is a tool for taking into consideration card removal. So let's go to the build the solve I've already built. So we'll go back to the beginning, get this flop, out of position, who is a 3-better. We've given him these sizings, which match up with, I think, what he bet in game. 7.4 bigs matches 74. So another feature I like here, before we go on, is the compare feature, which allows you to very quickly compare out of position equity versus in position equity, which obviously range equity and nut advantage drives a lot of our betting patterns and betting choices. Here we can see obviously out of position has greater equity. They have the over pairs, which we do not possess because we did not 4-bet. And so here is a very good tool to understand where we are at the beginning of hand. We can go to graphs, and we can see our linear equity graph, which I think is also very helpful. And this is an important tool for understanding who has nut advantage. Now clearly, our 3-better has range advantage across the entire. And notice on the right, as we scroll through, we are seeing which hands are in this part of the linear equity graph. Until we get to the very top, then we can see strategically no one has a nut advantage. We are matched with nut advantage. And this is because we both have 10s and we both have 9s, which we can, if we wanted to, confirm by going back and looking at ranges. There we go. 9s, pure 3-bets. 9s, pure call. So that makes total sense. And let's move through the hand a little bit. So I'm always looking at the graphs tool to understand the equity dynamics of this particular node. And I'm also using the compare tool. Another tool I like here is, this is the default look. So this is a pure strategy look. I also like the color the color display, kind of the aesthetics of the tool, which is a real departure from PIO, and I think pretty effective. So we could show our strategy here, but I'm trying to always think about equity. So I add strategy plus equity. We can understand where villain's equity is with each particular combo in this range on this texture. And we can see what his betting pattern is. So villain bet 74, which is totally in line with what his holding is, which is Queen Jack of Spades. And then we get to see our reaction. So this is where it gets interesting. Our top set, and we can see from the display here, has 86% equity, which obviously is good enough to fast play. And again, this is another chance to show you a feature I like. We are fast playing at a certain frequency. We can see it here. I'm now going to scroll using this bottom scroll feature. So we're primarily calling, but we do have some fast play, which I did. And let's compare the EV. So we can go to expected value of these actions. And we can see they're very similar. So call has very similar expected value to a fast play raise. And here's another example where we can do some sizing comparison. So he bet 7.4. We chose to go to 19.7 big blinds. Matches up here with the 197. I'm glad that solver liked my sizing. This is an example where I chose in the solve to add a number of sizings to understand what sizing solver liked best. Click bet 2. This is kind of almost a 3x, which I used, up to a little bit more than 4x, and it really likes my sizing. So we chose to raise in game, and this is solver's reaction. So the 3-better's reaction to this raise in position with his particular holding, we can go to, and again, I'll go through this first, and you can see, yeah, he's pure calling with his open-ended straight draw, except we can see he does have some raises with the combo draw, which makes sense. And he kind of splits. So he splits between raising and calling with his combo draw. And we can see that kind of mathematically in his equity percentage. So he has 56% equity with his combo draw. Significantly more than he does with his open-ended straight draw. So another tool I like to use here is I like to continually look at our range comparison. Now notice after we raise, in position us on the right here, we now have an equity advantage. We've obviously implying that we have a strong hand with our raise, and so our equity has gone up. And you can see now this is represented in the linear equity graph, which shows a significant portion of the range, especially towards the higher equity portion of the equity graph. We have a significant advantage. But in game, and what solver likes to do as well is call here. and then we can go to our turn. So our turn is, for our particular holding, good card, 2 of clubs. Now this is also a very interesting perspective here. I did give the 3-better the ability to lead here, our donk. And with this particular hand, he does have a high donking frequency. Upward, he's donking more than he's checking. Now this is interesting because obviously in game, most people are going to check and flow. But because of this card, I think it's because bricks are in position bluffs. He's got a high donking frequency. Now let's turn this just for curiosity and kind of show you another feature. You can very quickly change the turn card here to compare strategies with different turns. So I think a very interesting card would be, look at the flop, would be 8 of hearts. So let's go move up to 8 of hearts. Here we go. 8 of hearts, which completes a lot of our bluffs. Notice now we're checking, and then we can go to the graph and see how it changes as well. So 8 of hearts in position has a significant equity advantage now. See here, and we can, as we change this, very cool feature, you can see how our strategy changes. So let's go back to what we had in game, and then again, out of position has some equity advantage here, so it gets some donks. Now in game, as most people will, he checked, and we led for a third. Now this is another time, or another node in the game tree where I was very curious what Solver thought of my sizing. Solver does not like my sizing. My sizing was 204 in game. Solver saw that as too small. It chose to bet bigger, 310 or 464, which makes sense. I would imagine makes sense because we want to get money in and price his draws. Now this would have been very interesting if you put 5 or 6 or 7 sizings here and see kind of where the bell curve of what Solver's preferred betting would be. But we gave it 3 sizings in check, and it liked the bigger third size here. So what our pot 619, it liked a half sizing, and it liked a B75. So here's a B50. It really liked that sizing, B75, and my sizing it does not like, which is B204. So we're going to go a little bit off what happened in game with my 204, and we're going to go to a preferred sizing of B310 for us, the in-position player, with the top set. So if we bet half, we can now see, and I really like this tool here, we can now see what villain folds. Villain actually folds, it's open into straight total, that sizing. But I also want to show a very effective way to look, I think, for me, when we see this action by a player where it's mixing calls and folds and raises. We can sort by equity and see what its action is. And also, what we see here is the bar width. This is showing us at what frequency we have this hand, how often we have this hand. We can also set this to full, and it does not give us the additional information of how often we have that combo, or Solver has that combo at that particular point in the tree. I'm going to set this back to normalized. So, facing this half-size bet, out of position has check raises. We can see it's got check raises from the very top of its range, and then going down, and then we can see where the break-even point is by sorting by equity. And we can see now Jack 10 begins to fold, so top pair blocking the flush draw folds at 44% equity. But we also could see that it's got implied odds. So for instance, its flushes are calling because of the implied odds of calling with flushes. So solver bets 310, it bets half in position. Out of position, let's say we'll call. Let's say, and then in game, and we're off. Obviously, we're off this particular hand now. In game, it was the 6 of clubs. Out of position is now pure checking. Has no donks in the situation. And that's because of SPR, obviously. We have half our stack left. SPR is 0.5. We check, and here is our strategy. Now, it's getting a little bit harder to read because it shows how often we have that hand, but we can choose, if we want, to go to full. And now we can see what we're doing and not displaying how often or what frequency we have that particular holding. And then we can, what I'd like to do here is compare it to equity. Now we can see where our bluffs are coming from. King, queen with essentially 12%, no equity, bluffing at a high frequency. King, jack, bluffing at a high frequency. So really, obviously with our hand, it's pure shove. So if we were to shove, we can now see what will unfolds and calls. And again, this is a point in the tree when I'm looking at a hand where I really like to sort by equity. And we can see where it's calling. And then, if we get to the point where we don't have these combos that much, we can decide to make the width of the frequency of the hand full. So we can see where the break-even point is. So clearly, once we get down to about 28% equity, I'm not going to calculate pot odds, but this is clearly going to correlate to pot odds. We can begin to see where we begin to fold. And once we get down to 27% equity, 26, we're folding pure. So that is a very quick and dirty overview of DeskTop PostFlop. If you're considering solvers, please give this one a nod, give it a look. It's been a very effective tool for me to understand how to use solves to go over poker hands. Thanks a lot.